Welcome, science friends, to Intro to Cells. So first of all, what is a cell? We know that they're the basic unit of life, but there's so many different kinds. So here we can see a few different types of cells. We see our pretty familiar red blood cells. We have some longer nerve cells. One of these looks a little bit like an egg cell. And so there's lots and lots of different types of cells, but what is a cell to begin with? There are two main types of cells, prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells. Prokaryotic cells are one different kind. Breaking down that word, pro means before. Karyotic or karyon is that second part of the word. That usually means nut or kernel. So we're talking about, small things with things inside of it, like a nut has a shell on the outside and there's a nut on the inside. And eukaryotic cells, that prefix eu, means well or normal, because most of the cells we're familiar with are eukaryotic cells, so they're normal, so to speak, to us. And again, we see that ending karyotic or karyon, meaning nut or kernel. What's really important to note is different sizes when it comes to cells. When we think about cells, all we know is usually that they're pretty small. But even within cells, there's a great range of sizes. So for example, most bacteria is 1 to 10 microns. Now, those are really, really itty-bitty tiny measurements. Compared to eukaryotic cells can be 10 to 100 times larger than most bacterial cells. So why do we even care about cells? Well, of course, cells are the basic unit of life, and we are studying life in biology. But just like we remember from our levels of organization, cells are the basis of all tissues, and tissues make up organs, and organs make our bodies. But without those cells, we couldn't have the rest of those higher levels. So it's really important that we know how cells work so that we can take care of our bodies and we can study other things with bodies that are multicellular or even unicellular life. Cells do the work of keeping things alive, as they are the basic unit of life. Even if it's a one single-celled or unicellular organism, it's going through all of the different things that it needs to do to stay alive. Prokaryotic cells, they do not have what we call a nucleus. As we see in the image here, we see a very clear nucleus in the middle of our eukaryote, but our prokaryote doesn't have that. So an important example of prokaryotes are bacteria. So almost all bacteria is single-celled, and so they would classify as prokaryotes. So some interesting traits: they do not have a nucleus, like I said on the previous slide, but they do have genetic material, DNA, and instead of being held inside of the nucleus like a eukaryote, it just kind of floats around inside of their cell. Prokaryotes are the smallest type of cell, so like we saw in the size comparison, they are very, very tiny, especially on the micro scale, but they're even smaller than animal cells. Prokaryotes are the oldest type of cell, so the very first life were actually prokaryotes. So that's probably why we have the pro or before prefix, because it's before big things came along. It was the oldest type. And because they're so old, they're also the simplest type of cell. So there isn't a whole lot of complexity. They're just doing the bare minimum to stay alive. They have very few organs, or as you'll learn more in the organelle video, organelles. So cells have organs just like we do, except prokaryotes have even fewer of those organs. They're doing bare minimum to stay alive. On the other hand, eukaryotic cells are much more complex. They do have the nucleus, and they have a lot more of those little organs or organelles inside of them. So number one on our eukaryote list, the best way to identify a eukaryote is that it has a nucleus. This is where eukaryotes store their genetic material, so their DNA. Really, really important, and it keeps it locked away and safe inside the nucleus. They have a lot of organelles. They have a lot more things floating around inside of them, which is part of why they're bigger, so that they need room for more of those organs inside of them to function. Without these organelles, would not be able to carry out a lot of the functions that they need to survive and keep us alive. Eukaryotic cells are much more complex due to their size and all of those different organelles. Eukaryotic cells are the largest, again, because they need all of that room to store those organelles. Eukaryotes can be just one cell, or they can make up a much more complex multicellular organism, like us. We have so many cells going on, and they're all eukaryotic. All plants, animals, fungi, and protists are eukaryotic cells. So basically everything else, except for bacteria, there's always going to be exceptions, but as a general statement, most things that are alive are going to be eukaryotes. Within eukaryotes, we have two different types of cells. We have plant cells and we have animal cells. Plant cells have a few distinguishing characteristics. They have cell walls, so in addition to a sort of membrane, they have a protective wall. They have what's called a central vacuole, so it's a big, large bubble in the middle that helps store water. And they have chloroplasts, and these are sort of the telltale sign of a plant because the chloroplasts are what make them green. They help with photosynthesis. With animal cells, they do not have that cell wall. It's not protected by that cell wall. It just has a membrane. All of its vacuoles are very small. So like the plant, we saw it had that really big, huge one in the middle. But with our animal cells, we have a vacuole. It's just much smaller. And there's no chloroplast. Animals cannot undergo photosynthesis. So cells have a lot of jobs to do. They help us breathe. Both plants and animals breathe. They help us eat. They help us make energy, build molecules, like our macromolecules. They help us remove waste. So when we're going through some cell processes, we oftentimes create waste of some sort. They help us control our internal conditions or homeostasis. They respond to external environment stimuli. And of course, they need to build more cells. They need to repair things if things get broken. So they have a lot of jobs to do. There are three main ones that we'll look at more when we talk about organelles. But the first number one is make energy. Cells can't work if they don't have energy. We need energy for all of the activities that happen, all of the functions that they do, and they also need to clean up the waste they produce while making that energy. The second main job is to make proteins. Proteins are the workers in our bodies, so we need to make a lot of them in order to function. And the last main important job is to make more cells, especially if you are growing. We always need more cells if we're getting bigger and bigger, but also as we age, as we get hurt, we're going to have to replace them, or if they're damaged, you skin your knee or whatever, we need to be able to repair or replace those damaged cells. That was Intro to Cells. I hope it helped.